Thanks for coming, everybody. This talk is called the Intro to Dash. My name is Nicholas Krusten. I'm the VP of Product at Plotly. Just to do like the little get to know the audience piece of things, can you raise your hand if you would consider yourself an analyst or a data scientist? Okay, and raise your hand if you would consider yourself a developer. Doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. All right. And who here? Raise your right hand if you speak Python. Raise your left hand simultaneously if you also speak JavaScript. All right, lower your Python hand. All right, good. Perfect. The set intersection is complete. Thank you. And then finally, who here has used Plotly before? Plotly technology stuff before. All right, this is great. Super. So, I should mention that all these slides are available at bit.ly/dash_intro if you want to just follow along or whatever. They'll be available basically there forever. So a couple words about Plotly. Every time I go to meetups these days, I find that people from outside of Montreal have heard of Plotly, and people from inside of Montreal don't know that Plotly is a Montreal company. We're based here. We were founded here. Most of our employees are here. So raise your hand if you were surprised by this. All right, we're getting better. We're getting better. The message is percolating. So Plotly is a data visualization company. This is a little smattering of some of the types of charts. Am I in the way? Some of the types of charts that you can make using our technology. So you've got maps, you've got network diagrams, you've got scatter plots, you've got some funky ribbon things that I don't know what they're called in the corner there. One of the questions that sort of comes up over and over, both in person and on the internet, is, I'll go back to those. Is Plotly free? If you Google is Plotly, you get is Plotly free, which is one of the questions I'm going to address in a second. But while we're at it, I'm going to talk about some of the other things. So is Plotly free? I'll talk about it. If is Plotly open source? I'm going to talk about that. Is Plotly Dash free? We'll get to that too. Is Plotly good? Yes. Is Plotly.js free? Yes. Is Plotly secure? Yes. Is Plotly an anaconda? Yes. Is Plotly down? No. Is Plotly worth it? Yes. Is Plotly free for commercial use? Sometimes. I'm going to go back to the slides that I skipped here. So Plotly is based in Montreal. We have a really beautiful office in the Myland in the shadow of the building of Ubisoft. So we are definitely here in Montreal. We are cool and hip and have fun and have beautiful offices and have a sign outside next to a Bixby station. And we're hoping to host some meetups at Plotly starting next year. So other than the Our Ladies meetup, which already happens at Plotly, there's going to be some more. So hopefully all of you fine folks will be able to come in and see our space soon. So to answer the question, is Plotly free, I've put together this slide. So Plotly, as a company, we've been around for about 6 years. We make a number of things. We make a bunch of free, open source, and awesome products. We also make a bunch of paid, closed source, and awesome products. So in the free and open source category, we've got Dash, which is the topic of the meetup tonight. We've also got Plotly.js. Who here has used Plotly.js, our JavaScript library? Not so many, okay. Plotly.py, our Python library. Okay, good. We've also got Plotly.r, which is an R binding for Plotly, and a whole slew of other open source products, such as Falcon, which is an SQL GUI for making charts. We've got a whole bunch of React components, React pivot table, React chart editor. Please come to github.com/Plotly and check out some of our open source stuff. In the paid and closed source and awesome product category, we've got a couple of products that are related to Dash, which I'll mention at the end, the Dash deployment server and the Dash design kit. And then we've also got what used to be known as Plotly Cloud and Plotly Enterprise and is now called Chart Studio Cloud and Chart Studio Enterprise, which is sort of a point-and-click UI for making charts. So is Plotly free? All the stuff that's called Plotly on the left over here is, and all the stuff that is not called Plotly is not. So yes, Plotly open source is free. But tonight's talk is about Dash. So Dash is a Python framework for building analytic applications. And our tagline is no JavaScript required. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit tonight. So I'm glad that there's some people who speak JavaScript. You no longer need to speak JavaScript. There's no problem. You can just stick with Python. So what is an analytics app? I've got a pile of little examples here that I will show you some of. So this is one of our standard Dash examples. It is basically a web app for interactively visualizing a large data set, which is basically production information over a number of years for some oil wells. I'm not an expert in this particular topic. This is just one of the demos that we have. And so you'll see that you've got some text, you've got some sliders, you've got some drop downs, you've got some radio buttons. As I mouse over this map here, you see that the chart on the right is updating. So this is nice. It's kind of interactive. I can change the slider. You can see that as I move the slider, different things change. The text up here updates. I can scroll down. I can actually select a time range on the histogram here. The rest of the charts update. So this is sort of a typical data exploration type analytics app. And this was all coded in Python. And the source for this is available. If you go to the Dash website under the gallery, you can see the source code for this app and run it yourself and modify it and do anything that you like. Here's another example of what we call an analytics app. This is a data set, kind of a sad data set related to the opioid epidemic in the United States. It has a map. You can select some counties here. And the chart next to it updates with information about the relevant counties. You can switch, to a different time frame and sort of see the progression of this epidemic. You can see a number of different statistics about it. So this is another example of what we would call an analytics app. Again, entirely coded in Python, but hey, it's nice. It's interactive, runs in the browser. You've got this sort of linked graphics thing. You can also connect Dash to live data sources. So this is another example that's connected to, a simulated API for the financial market, where you can see bid and ask information changing in real time. You can close the charts. You can add new charts. You can change the view of the charts. So this is pretty representative of the kind of app you can build, again, in pure Python, running in the browser, connected to a live data source. Hopefully starting to create a bit of a picture in your head of the kinds of things you can do with Dash. You can also do some really funky stuff. You can build image processing apps. So this is a bit out there, but kind of neat. So you can, in this app here, you can select a region of this image, and let's run a filter on it, contour, run the operation. And here you go. You've got kind of a filter and an updated histogram. So this is a bit of a tech demo from our perspective, but you can use Dash to present results of AI applications that work on images. You can use Dash to connect to any Python data processing library. In this case, it's Pillow, and surface the results on the web, which is kind of exciting to us. And the final two examples I have are a little bit different. All the examples I've shown you so far were created by Plotly employees and interns. The next two are sort of from out there in the community. So Dash is open source. People use Dash. They grab it. They build stuff. We find out about it on Twitter. And this is a really neat example of someone who wanted to show the various scenarios for climate change. And so very simple. Just you can choose the year your grandmother was born in, the year you were born. I'm not that old. The year my mother was born, and the year my child was born quite recently. And there you go. You've got a little scenario of what the global temperature might look like for all these particular life events. So this is also an analytics app. Kind of simple, kind of cute, very easy to build with Dash. And the last demo is actually something that we were thrilled to find out about this one. This is basically, a paper came out in Nature recently explaining something that's way beyond my head, way over my head in terms of understanding, should actually not quote this completely wrong, a computational method for predicting DNA repair outcomes. And what we are excited about this paper is that the demo for this paper is a Dash app. So this researcher who got a paper published in quite a prestigious publication decided to present his results in the form of a Dash app. He picked up Dash, built a whole site around it, and it's actually really sophisticated. It uses basically every feature of Dash that we can imagine. It does stuff in batch. It does stuff in real time. It's got a really cool spinner animation that we might copy at some point. You can interact with the charts. You can click on stuff. So this is actually like a tool that real scientists can use. You've got shareable download, shareable links. So this is the kind of apps that we're really excited to be able to render possible by making Dash open source. So these are all a little bit complicated. I'm not going to have a chance to explain to you how to build this in the next 30, 40 minutes. but I just wanted to kind of provide some motivating examples. So back to my little talk here. What I will do is I will build a growth chart, a little bit more modest, but you know, live coding is always a little bit more stressful. So who here has seen one of these in real life on a piece of paper? Okay. So it's basically, it's a chart you often fill out when you have children. You take your kids to the doctor, they measure and weigh your kid, they put a dot on each chart, and then they tell you, you know, your kid is at the whatever percentile for weight, the whatever percentile for height. It's either good, it's either bad. Maybe they're, you know, they're crossing the centiles, so they're either, you know, gaining speed or losing speed. It's actually a really well-designed visualization tool. It's a really sort of highly evolved paper tool for doctors and nurses. You can use it in any condition. You can, it's both a record of what's gone on with a child's life and a sort of, not a diagnostic tool, but a tool for sort of evaluating the health of a child. So it's really neat. And a friend of mine, Francis, who organizes the Viz Montreal meetup, has kind of picked this as his favorite chart, his like most, you know, most well-designed chart, because it's got, you know, multiple axes. It's very easy to use. So it's really neat and very low tech. We're going to make a Dash version, which is not at all a replacement for this, but I figured this would be a neat example to follow. So all of the code that I'm about to show you is available on GitHub at the URL which I've just obscured. So you feel free to download this and try it yourself. So I'm going to kind of live code a Dash version of this for you. So let me arrange my windows here. All right. All right, so this is unreadable. Let's make it bigger. And make this much smaller. No, that's not going to work out for me, but okay. So I'm going to show you basically a very simple Dash app. This is basically all you need to get going. Sorry for the blurriness. But this is basically a very simple Python program. I'm going to import Dash and a special module called Dash HTML components. And from Dash, I have the Dash app object, so I'm going to create one, app equals dash.dash. And I have to set a layout. So a layout is basically just the HTML frame for my app is going to look like. So this is, you know, classic hello world. The app's going to say hi there in H1, and I'm going to run it. So let's do this. Oops. Let's save this guy. To run it, you just do you know, Python app.py. Because I'm in a live environment, I'm likely to mess up, and I'll put it in a while true loop so I don't have to constantly reboot it. Here we go, it's running. I can open it up. Hi there. Okay, so this is basically a Dash app. Meant to be as absolutely simple as possible. Not really that helpful or useful at the moment. So let's see whether we can do anything more interesting. So this is what we call a callback. So I'm going to try and indent this a little bit differently here. Let's reload that. So I'm going to import a new module called Dash Core Components as DCC. And a couple other components, inputs and output from dash.dependencies. And my layout is going to get a little more sophisticated. It's now a div, so it's a box to put other stuff in. And I'm going to have my typical H1, where it's going to say hi there. But I'm also going to add an input, dcc.input. So each of these has a name, an ID, sorry. So the input has an ID name, and the H1 is ID greeting. And the default value for the input is going to be you. And the H1 has children, hi there. So if I actually look at this, I'm going to make it a lot bigger. This is kind of what it looks like right now. So you notice the cool thing is I just saved the app, and it reloaded in the browser. So that's kind of nice. We work really hard at Plotly to make the development experience of Dash as pleasant as possible. And here's the app in action. So how does this work? Well, I've registered what's called a callback here. So app.callback, I'm saying the output of my callback is greeting.children. So greeting is my H1 here. And the input from my callback, the dependency, is the value property of the element whose ID is name. So essentially I'm saying, whenever I update the value of name, I should update the children of greeting. And what I should put there is, hi there, name. And that's it. I've built essentially a, admittedly fairly trivial interactive application. So how does this work? Well, essentially, every keystroke in my input here is firing an HTTP call back to my Dash app, and it's executing this function in Python. So let's prove that. App reloads. OK. There we go. So this is essentially the magic of Dash. You declare your callbacks in Python, and Dash sort of pulls together the UI for you. And then anytime any user interacts with the front end, calls are made back to the Dash server, and the app is updated. And this is how we get away with no JavaScript required, right? Kind of cool. You can specify all sorts of stuff in Python this way. So this is pretty trivial. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. Let's make a small chart. So let me save this guy here. Ooh. All right. Here is basically your growth chart, very similar to what I showed you before. This data comes from the World Health Organization. It's basically the same data that everybody uses. So here I've got the weight in kilogram and the age in days. And this is a typical Plotly chart. You can zoom. You can double-click to reset. You can change some sort of hover options. You can download the plot as a PNG. This is sort of typical Plotly.js interactive visualization. And it's built in Dash, sort of obviously. So how does this actually work? Well, I've still just imported HTML components and core components and my inputs and outputs. And I've now imported pandas as well. So people are familiar with pandas? OK, all the Python people. Pandas is basically a way of loading and interacting with data sets. So I'm loading the weight for age girls data set, which I got from the World Health Organization, which is just a big file here. It's got age, LM and S, which are the important statistical parameters, and then the percentile. So the first percentile, third percentile, and so on. So here I'm plotting, don't want to be wrong, the 5th, 50th, and 95th percentile weight for age. So how did I do this? Well, here I've just replaced my layout with not an H1 and not an input, but a graph, dcc.graph. And I specified the figure here pretty simply. I'm just going to make this a lot smaller here. We don't really need it to be so big. And I mean, it's fairly readable. I've got some data. I've got 3 series. The first one is age versus P5. The second one is age versus P50. The third one is age versus P95. And a couple of niceties. I got a title and some axis titles. So this here is a what we call a Plotly.js figure. So there's a whole bunch of different options you can put in here. We've been working for 6 years essentially on making this one of the most powerful data visualization libraries in the world. You can make 3D charts, you can make ternary charts, you can make polar charts, you can make heat maps, you can make actual maps. They're interactive, and it's all specified via this figure object here. So this is just a small taste of what you can do. And then when I run my app, this just gets rendered in the browser. OK, so just to recap, I've showed you how you can put HTML in place, you can fire callbacks, you can make charts, put it all together, make an interactive chart. It reloads. OK, so in this case, it's pretty simple. I've basically just got an input. I've got this dot here. And as I change the weight, you can see that the dot moves up and down. Same trick. You can probably guess how it's wired together. I've basically got my layout is a div with an input and a graph. And I've said that the graph's figure depends on the input's value. And then I just re-render the new version of the figure. So every time I click on this little button here to increase the number, my browser phones up my app and says, hey, give me the new figure, give me the new figure, give me the new figure. And Plotly.js just draws the new figure, draws the new figure. No problem. So now I've got a chart that depends on an input. which is kind of cool. We're basically most of the way there. And all I'm doing here is I'm just taking the weight that came in from the input and putting it as the y value of this new dot that I made. Am I talking too fast, by the way? Everything's good? Okay, great. So let's wire it all together. Actually, no, one thing I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you how to style this thing. So this is a little bare bones. Oops, sorry, you got some sans serif here. This may actually be Times New Roman, and it's not very well aligned. So you do have to know a little bit of CSS to get Dash apps to be nicely styled. So no JavaScript required, little CSS required, not much. Little 20 lines here, and you just put it in a style.css in an assets folder, and it actually live reloads my app, which is kind of cool. So I can mess with the CSS here. I can make things, you know, blue. Probably not a good idea, but it's live reloading, which is kind of nice. So we can undo that terrible mistake. So that's how CSS works in Dash. So now let me kind of show you the full app. I think I just called it full app. So it's going to look a little intimidating because the screen is a little small, but one thing that's really cool is this app is actually only 78 lines of Python, including some new lines. I have a vertical screen at work. It fits in one screen. So that's kind of cool. Not everyone has a vertical screen, but you know, you can make some fairly compact apps. So here's what this thing looks like. You can choose the sex of your child, girl and boy, because there are different curves for girls and boys. The World Health Organization only gives me the 2 options. So I wish I had more, but for any given child, you can specify the birthday. So you know, let's say you had a child that was born on August 1st, 2017, and this is a little small. Let's make them a little healthier here. A little nice tall child here. So you can see that as I'm interacting with these 2 inputs and this date picker, that the charts are updating in real time. I've got, you know, I can hover, I can do all sorts of nice things. Let's say this child is actually born much more recently. Sorry, much more recently. You can see that the x-axis of the charts changed, the y-axis of the charts changed, and everything just sort of works out. So here's my growth chart, all built in Dash. How does this work? Well, I mean, it's basically the same thing, just remixed over and over with more and more complexity, right? So instead of loading the 1 data set, I got to load 4, right? I got to load length. It's called length because little babies, they don't stand, so you call it length. Length / height, and then boys and girls. So I got 4 data sets. My layout is a little bit more complicated. So my layout, you know, when you look at it side by side with the app, it's pretty easy to read, right? I've got these guys here are radio items. There they are. I've got 3 label and input pairs. So label, which contains an input, label, which contains an input, label, which contains, oh, this is new. It's a date picker. So Dash core components doesn't just come with inputs and graphs, but it comes with a whole slew of different things. So you saw the drop downs, you saw the sliders, and some of the other apps that I showed you. Date picker is one of them, which is kind of nice. And then I've got an H3, which is an output, and then I've got my 2 DCC.graphs. So if you look closely, as I interact with this, there's 2 things that are changing, right? I've got my weight for age curve is changing, and this is changing. And this is one of the things that we're most excited about at Plotly, is that Dash is actually a way to make interactive apps that are complete. It's not just the charts that are updating live. It's every part of the page. Anything you can express in HTML can update. A little bit like D3, data-driven documents, if you will, but all specified in Python, which is really nice. So we're updating the percentile, and we're updating this chart. And then if I change the height, you can see that the other chart changes as well as the percentile. So because there are 3 things that are being updated, you might expect to see 3 callbacks in my code. And that's exactly what you'll see. So callback number 1 here, I'm updating the children of the output, which is this little text here. Callback number 2 is the figure for the height chart, and callback number 3 is the figure for the weight chart. So I pulled some of this stuff out to make the code small, but I've got the little function that generates the curve, and it'll return the data and layout for the chart, which I think I can make fit. Yeah. So, you know, I got a little extra styling information, which takes up some more space to get the colors and the fill and the marker and stuff like that. But essentially, this is the same kind of figure as I showed before. The one thing that's kind of new and exciting is that I'm actually doing a little bit of math here. So it may not seem like much, but I had to hit the books pretty hard to understand how these equations work. when you know the height of a child and when they're born, you can put the dot on the chart. That's really easy, right? This is the power of the growth chart, is that you just put the dot on the chart and you look at which percentiles they're between, like, okay, this kid's between 50 and 75, closer to 75, we'll call it 70. But to actually do the math to compute this is a little bit more complicated. You need like the error function and a z-score. And so here, I'm actually calling a Python function that computes the percentile weight based on the days and the weight of the child. And so it's running this little Python equation here, which doesn't look like much, but it's doing some funky stats. Specifically, this error function would be a big pain to implement in pure JavaScript. So it's built in Python. I didn't even have to import SciPy or anything. It's just sitting there in the math module. And I'm pulling data out of this data set from Pandas using like this little double square bracket. This is actually a NumPy array. So I'm using some kind of intensive Python code here. And in here, I could have put anything. I could have put calls to scikit-learn. I could have put calls to TensorFlow. We have some examples of that kind of thing. This is the full power of Python here, which is then exposed in an interactive web application. Again, no JavaScript required. So this is the kind of thing that we get pretty fired up about with Dash, and that clearly a number of other people do as well, because they're downloading Dash like crazy and building apps all the time. So hopefully, this gives kind of a slightly accelerated sense of how one might go about building a Dash app. So just to recap, okay, we got some imports. We can load some data. We create the app. We assign the layout, which basically is this sort of like tree-like structure of what our inputs and outputs are going to be like. And then we register some callbacks. We say, this over here depends on that. This over here depends on that. And at the bottom, we run the app. When we connect to it, the user connects, and as they interact with the inputs, everything sort of bubbles out and the app stays in sync. The outputs are updated as a function of the inputs. I mean, it sounds so obvious when you describe it this way. Something that's kind of neat here is that, and this is sort of where the architecture of Dash really shines, is that this is completely stateless. There's no user state being kept in my app here. So you could connect arbitrary numbers of users to this app, and there'd be no problem, because the user only interacts with the Python backend when they click on something or when they actually interact with something. So there's no Python session running here. There's no large data set in memory or anything. Everything is just simple little callbacks, which allows you to both get away with running Dash apps on relatively small bits of hardware, but also means that Dash is totally shardable. If you want to run a Dash app with a lot of users, you just put more backends in place. This request here could go to one backend, and this request here could go to a different backend. It's all shared nothing. There's no problem. So Dash is sort of quite scalable in that way, which is really quite neat. And it makes it a very good fit for deploying on places like Heroku. So a Dash app, under the hood, we've sort of hidden some of these details to make it easier to use. Dash is built based on Flask, which is a Python micro framework for building APIs. And Heroku, which is a platform as a service provider, knows how to run Flask apps. So Heroku knows how to run Dash apps. No problem. I could take this app today, put it up on Heroku, and distribute the URL, and I could host this thing for the low price of $7 a month. But if I got lots and lots of users, I could just turn on more what they call dynos, turn on more workers, and just scale out. So this is one of the real strengths of Dash. So to get back to my little deck here. So yeah, basically the app that I showed you here is built in pure Python. I had to sprinkle a little bit of CSS to get it to look right, but certainly I didn't have to write any JavaScript, which is quite nice. This app is the kind of thing which you generally would have maybe built in Excel 5, 10, 20 years ago, right? You build a little app in Excel, you lock some of the cells, you lock some of the sheets, you put some of the formulas in there. One of the big problems with Excel is that they tend to be kind of write-only. It's really hard to take a really complicated spreadsheet that someone else wrote and go maintain it. If you make a change to an Excel file, you save it, and you want to undo it, well, it's a little hard to put into version control. So, compared to the way this kind of app might normally be built, it's much easier to put into version control, to collaborate, to do pull requests. So it's definitely a big step up from Excel. Also, it's a web app. It's not like a spreadsheet, which is kind of an advantage. You can run it on your laptop, or you can host it on Heroku, as I mentioned, or, DDS, Dash Deployment Server, didn't fit on my line here. So Dash Deployment Server is basically the main thing that Plotly sells around Dash. It's a way for an organization to internally host a large number of Dash apps and provides authentication, provides databases, provides Redis and task queues. So for more serious deployments of Dash apps, we do provide a commercial solution with support for hosting apps within the enterprise. And it works a little bit like Heroku. It's got some nice sort of Dash-specific features. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that the components which I imported at the top of my app, HTML and Dash core components, those aren't the only components. Anybody can build a Dash component. Anybody can build a new widget that renders in the browser and that communicates with the Python backend. So that's the part where you do actually need to know some JavaScript. So if you want to learn React or you know how React works, you can build a new Dash component and wire it into your app. And this is basically, it's kind of funny, you know, the tagline of Dash is no JavaScript required, although all the people at Plotly who work on Dash, all we do is work in JavaScript building React components to bring sort of the power of React and what you can do on the web to the hands of Python developers and data scientists who don't have time to learn how React works. So Dash components are essentially just React components with a couple of extra properties. And so if you see any JavaScript library out there in the world that you like, you see a cool chart, you see a cool control. If it's built in React, it's trivial to connect to Dash. If it's not built in React, you kind of got to go through the pain of wrapping it in a React container, which is its own set of problems. But then you can connect it to Dash fairly easily. And so all of Dash core components is basically that. Plotly.js charts, React select for the dropdowns, React slider for the sliders, the Airbnb React dates for the date picker. These are all just React components that we connected to the Dash ecosystem. And people are doing this. They're downloading Dash and following sort of our tutorials. We have a cookie cutter example for how to create a Dash app a Dash component from scratch. And on our community discussion site, every day people are posting examples of cool apps they've built, cool components they've built, components they'd like to see. So it's kind of an active community, which is really, really gratifying for us to see. So this is the discussion slide. So I guess I'll open up to any questions about the demo so far at this point. Happy to answer anything. Go back. I know I kind of blasted through some of the copy pasting of the code. Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Like the axe, like the MATLAB axe, for example, if you want to play around with it, or if you want to do stuff in your Python code and you don't want to visualize it and then save it, so is that possible?
So I'm not sure I understand the question, but so I've got these charts. They're in my browser, and I can download them as PNGs, and I can export them to like the Plotly Chart Studio. I can export them as JSON to edit them and customize them a little bit more. But there's no matplotlib object under the hood there. It's just JSON representation of a figure that's rendered by Plotly.js. So you don't have access to anything else other than that. Does that answer the question you had, or?
Yeah, I was wondering if you can play around with this later in other, packages or in matplotlib if you want to, mount on it.
You can. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to do that. It's mostly for building sort of apps. Although you could probably build a component that downloaded a reusable chunk of Python code. So nothing stops you from doing that. But out of the box, there's nothing for doing that. Yeah. No questions? Okay.
Is there a, I guess, an API? So let's say I have my separate app that React is using, and I'm wrapping some D3 or some magic thing. I suppose there's an API that I can use to communicate with the backend.
So the backend communicates with components via the thing that's actually running in the web browser. It's called the Dash render, and it has its API, but it's kind of a Hollywood principle API, so don't call us, we'll call you. So you get, if you provide a React component, it's instantiated and it's passed a bunch of props, and then it can tell the backend, hey, this prop has changed. But Dash essentially manages the HTTP communication by itself. And from the React perspective, it's all props. You get them out, and you get them in, and you push them out.
So as long as you wrap it, you're good. If you don't wrap it, then you do that yourself.
Yeah, it is possible to run arbitrary JavaScript in there if you want. Kind of goes against the no JavaScript required, but you can slide it in if you really want. Yeah.
What happens to the data? Do you have access to the data through the interface? Is it protected?
So in this case, the data is running inside the server process, and if I wanted to, I could add a component here that allowed the user to download the data. But if you don't, it's all on the back end, and all that's being sent to the front end here is the charts. Okay, great. So if you're interested in getting started right now with Dash, here are a bunch of useful links for you. So the Dash documentation, which contains everything that you've seen here, essentially a bunch of walkthroughs, is at dash.plot.ly. Pretty easy to remember. The Dash community is available at community.plot.ly. So you'll see posts there, people sort of asking for help, suggesting things. What we've started to see, which is really exciting, is people answering each other's questions. So it's no longer just sort of like all Plotly all the time. There's an actual Dash community sort of nucleating. And a lot of really great ideas come out of that community. So it's a fun forum to be on. It was mentioned earlier, we have a set of workshops that we're going to be running in the week of December 4th. So there's the 3 different events that we're running under the banner Dash Forward. So if you want to check out, we have a bit of an announcement about that. But I think on the first day, we're doing Donuts and Dash, which is a workshop in the morning. We give you donuts and tell you about Dash. The second day there, I think it's the Wednesday, we have a panel focused on women at Plotly and women in data science. And then the third day, we have an all-day sort of Dash workshop, a number of talks by the author of Dash, Chris Parmer. We have a talk by Fernando Perez, the founder of the IPython notebook project. And all this will be at Plotly headquarters in the Mylens. So check out the Dash Forward link there. There's RSVP pages for each of the separate events. And I may have missed a couple details, so please do check that out. And then finally, we have, yep.
Sorry, one more question. So there's a lot of back and forth between the browser side and the server side. Is there some way to push more data into them? So like to reduce the round trip time every time you click on something, you try not to do hundreds of milliseconds. Is there a way to reduce the...
That is a common question. To be honest, when I first saw Dash, I was kind of like, there's no way this can work. There's way too much chatter with the front end and the back end. So first of all, in practice, it actually turns out not to be as much of a problem as you might expect. You can get really, really far without needing to jump through hoops to avoid that. And the second part of the answer is we are working on a really neat framework to essentially load the data once and then specify callbacks, but in Python such that they're executed in JavaScript on the client side. So it'll be the same basic architecture. You'll say, this is declared as a function of that. But we're not going to be translating the Python into JavaScript, but we have a neat way based on Ramda to specify transformations that get executed on the client side. So you'll be able to do a limited but still quite powerful subset of these operations without the callback to the server. More powerful than that. You'll be able to do filtering, reducing, mapping, picking, all sorts of interesting operations on the client side. So for example, loading a large data set and then clicking on a point and seeing a line appear from where it used to be, or animations with a slider, all that stuff is possible with the client side framework that we're cooking up. There's an issue about that, I think in the community site and certainly on GitHub that you can subscribe to if you want updates about that. Yeah. So the last item on my list here is the Dash Club newsletter. I hate mailing lists as much as anybody else, but this is different. This is Dash Club. Dash Club is a newsletter. It is entirely laid out in monospaced font. It is sent once every 2 weeks by Chris, the author of Dash, and it contains nothing but cool technical things about Dash. So you'll learn about breaking changes to the API, which happen very rarely, new features, which happen very often, and a sort of hand-selected set of neat new components and examples from the community site. Plus, it's essentially where we'll be kind of pushing out news about Dash. So it's actually a very worthwhile newsletter to subscribe to if you can handle getting one monospaced laid out email every 2 weeks. I highly recommend it. Dash Club, everyone. And then the last thing is a little bit of a teaser. The product that we're working very hard on at the moment is called Dash Design Kit. It's a commercial add-on for Dash And it basically provides the other half of the no JavaScript required tagline, the no CSS required tagline. So you'll be able to create really beautiful apps with powerful layouts, sidebars. We already have tab nav in core components, but a new powerful kind of header menu with a hamburger, cards, and a unified and controllable color theme that'll sort of ripple through your entire app. So if you wanted to make a set of apps that all look the same, are on brand, have nice colors, and look like some of the most professional dashboards you've ever seen on the web, Dash Design Kit is for you. And it'll certainly be announced on the community site and in Dash Club. So this is one of the products that we're most excited about. So the obligatory set of links. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at Nicholas Kruchten on Twitter. If you want to follow Plotly, we are at PlotlyGraphs on Twitter. And then the sort of combination of the two. If you want to send me email to my work email, it's nicholas@plot.ly. And I would be happy to talk to you either after this meetup or by email or Twitter or whatever about Dash in particular or the Plotly ecosystem in general. I believe that is my last slide. So if anybody has any further questions, I think we have a couple minutes. Or clapping.